We're terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out, the CEO's daughter said on her first day as CEO, not even looking up from her laptop. I handed over my badge calmly. I want to do this right. Tell your mother the board meeting in 3 hours should be interesting. She had no idea I owned 67% of the company. Madison Chen looked up from her laptop for the first time since I'd entered her new corner office, the one that used to belong to her mother. Her manicured fingers stopped mid-type. The confusion on her face would have been amusing if my chest wasn't tight with the particular kind of anger that comes from being dismissed by someone wearing a promotion they didn't earn. Excuse me? I placed my employee badge on the edge of her imported mahogany desk. 15 years I'd carried that piece of plastic. Your mother will want to know. The board meeting. 3 hours. Security arrived before she could respond. 2 guys I'd known for a decade, who'd eaten cake at my farewell party when I supposedly retired from operations, now avoiding my eyes as they flanked me. Madison had already returned her attention to her screen, apparently satisfied that the problem had been escorted out. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. My reflection in the polished doors showed a 47-year-old woman in a sensible blazer, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. I looked exactly like what Madison had seen, middle management. Disposable. She hadn't bothered asking why I'd requested the meeting. Hadn't wondered why someone from accounting wanted 15 minutes with a brand new CEO on her first day. Her mother had clearly briefed her on which employees to cut, and my name must have been at the top. Clean house early, establish dominance, make it clear that nepotism had its privileges. What neither of them knew could fill volumes. 18 years ago, I sat in a coffee shop in Portland with Victoria Chen, working out our business plan on napkins. We were both 30, both tired of making other people rich, both convinced we could build something better. She had the operational expertise and the connections. I had the technical background and the vision for what business intelligence software could become if someone actually asked end users what they needed. We called it Insight Analytics. Split everything 50-50. She'd handle clients and scaling, I'd build the product and manage the engineering teams. Perfect partnership, or so I thought through those first electric years when we worked 100-hour weeks and turned our 2-person operation into something that actually mattered. The software worked because I'd spent 5 years at IBM watching million-dollar implementations fail. I knew where the bodies were buried. I knew why enterprise software made people miserable. Our platform was different, intuitive, powerful, actually usable by humans who weren't database administrators. By year 3, we had 40 employees and 8-figure revenue. Victoria started talking about venture capital. I wanted to stay independent, keep building thoughtfully. She won that argument by bringing in her husband, David, as CFO. Suddenly I was outvoted on my own board. The venture money changed everything. Victoria hired consultants who used words like scalability and market positioning. She brought in a new head of product who'd never written a line of code but had an MBA from Wharton. My engineering teams started getting directives from people who'd never met a customer. I pushed back. Quietly at first, then louder as I watched our product bloat with features nobody wanted. The consultant suggested that perhaps the founding vision had served its purpose. Victoria, my supposed best friend, nodded along in meetings. She started introducing me as one of our senior developers instead of co-founder. The breaking point came during a strategy session. The MBA wanted to deprecate our core analytics engine, the one I'd built, the one customers actually loved, in favor of something flashier that would look better in demos. I said no. Victoria said we needed to think bigger than our personal attachments. That night, David called me at home. Victoria wanted to buy me out. They'd found someone to run engineering who better fit the company's growth trajectory. The offer was generous, $8 million for my 50% stake. Enough to retire comfortably. Enough to make me disappear. I asked for time to think. Used that week to talk to lawyers instead. Here's what Victoria and David didn't understand: I'd actually read our operating agreement. Every comma, every clause. The shares I held were mine, period. They couldn't force me out without cause, and doesn't agree with our new direction wasn't cause. They could remove me from operational roles, but they couldn't touch my equity. So I made them an offer instead. I'd step back from day-to-day operations. No drama, no fight. I'd take an advisor role, keep my shares, and they could run the company however they wanted. But I wasn't selling. Not at any price. Victoria's face went cold in a way I'd never seen. She agreed, but something fundamental broke between us. Within a month, she'd rewritten the company history on our website. The founding story now featured her having the initial vision and building a team of talented engineers to execute it. My name appeared once, in a list of early employees. I took my advisor title and my shares and left the building. Watched from a distance as they took Insight Analytics public 6 years later. Watched Victoria become the darling of tech journalism, the self-made woman CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. Watched her buy a house in Lake Oswego and join charitable boards. I did some consulting, made some investments, taught myself everything about corporate governance and securities law. Stayed in touch with a few people still inside the company. Kept my shares in a trust that didn't obviously connect to me. And I waited. 4 years ago, I came back. Not as myself, not as the co-founder who'd been erased. I came back as Sarah Miller, 43-year-old accountant with 15 years of experience at mid-size firms, solid references, no visible connection to the company's past. Victoria had never been good with faces outside her immediate circle. She'd met hundreds of job candidates over the years, attended thousands of meetings. When HR brought her my resume for a senior accountant position in finance, she rubber-stamped the approval without a second glance. I kept my head down. Did my work well but not too well. Made myself useful but forgettable. The kind of employee who's been there so long you can't quite remember when they started. Meanwhile, I used every spare dollar to buy more shares. Not enough at once to trigger disclosure requirements, but steady accumulation through various holding structures my lawyers had set up. Public company shares are easier to acquire than people think if you're patient and careful. Insight Analytics had gone through the usual post-IPO turbulence. Some quarters strong, others weak. Stock price volatile. Long-term shareholders periodically dumping positions. I was there to catch what they sold. By the end of year 2 back inside, I owned 52% of the company. By year 3, 61%. I'd spent most of my buyout money and a significant portion of returns from other investments, but I'd done something Victoria thought impossible. I'd become the majority shareholder in my own company. The final push to 67% came 6 months ago when a venture fund decided to exit their position. I liquidated almost everything I had left. Borrowed against assets. Made it work. Technically, I should have disclosed my holdings once I crossed certain thresholds. My lawyers had opinions about this. But securities law is complicated, and the various trusts and holding companies were structured just opaquely enough to buy time. I wasn't breaking laws, I was exploiting the gaps between them. I'd planned to reveal myself eventually, on my own terms, probably at an annual shareholder meeting. Force Victoria to acknowledge what she'd spent a decade pretending didn't exist. Take my company back with the dignity she'd denied me. Then Victoria announced her retirement last month. 53, at the peak of her success, stepping down to spend more time with family and focus on philanthropic efforts. The board would vote on her replacement, but everyone knew Madison was being groomed for the role. 28 years old, MBA from Stanford, 3 years of management consulting, and 18 months in various rotational positions at Insight. Totally qualified if you ignored every metric except her last name. I'd met Madison twice. Once at a company holiday party where she'd walked past me without acknowledgement. Once in an elevator where she'd been too busy on her phone to notice anyone else existed. She had her mother's confidence without any of the competence that had once backed it up. Still, I'd planned to handle this professionally. Request a meeting with a new CEO, explain the situation privately, offer a path forward that didn't humiliate anyone. I'm not vindictive by nature. I wanted my company back, but I didn't need revenge. Until I got the meeting requests yesterday. Subject line, employment status discussion. Madison wanted to see me this morning, her first day as CEO. My old instinct said something was wrong, but I showed up anyway, curious what she wanted. Turns out she wanted to fire me. Not because of performance. Not because of restructuring. Because her mother had left her a list of legacy employees who don't fit the new vision. Because I was 47 and female and in accounting, which apparently made me the wrong kind of diversity hire. Because Madison was establishing her authority by cutting people who'd been around longer than she'd been alive. She didn't ask about my work. Didn't review my file. Just looked at me like I was a line item to be deleted and told me I was terminated effective immediately. So much for professional courtesy. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour after security escorted me out, making calls. My attorney first, confirming everything was in order. Then my investor relations contact, ensuring the proper disclosures were ready to file. Finally, 3 independent board members who were about to have their phones blown up. Between calls, I allowed myself a moment to feel the weight of what I'd just set in motion. 4 years of careful planning, of swallowing my pride every day I walked through those doors as someone forgettable. 4 years of watching Victoria give interviews about her vision while I reconciled expense reports 3 floors below her office. 4 years of strategic patience, and it all came down to the next few hours. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The funny thing about revenge, if that's even the right word, is that people expect it to feel triumphant. They expect a rush of power, a sense of justice served. What I felt instead was exhausted. Sad for what could have been if Victoria had just been honest. Sad for the friendship we destroyed through mutual stubbornness and pride. But underneath that sadness was something harder. Something forged through years of erasure and dismissal. Call it determination. Call it refusal to disappear. Call it whatever you want, but it kept my hands steady when I dialed the next number. The quarterly board meeting had been scheduled for months. Routine agenda, financial results, strategic updates, management transitions. The kind of meeting where Victoria would pass the crown to Madison, everyone would congratulate themselves, and they'd be done in 90 minutes. I'd had my assistant add one item to the agenda last week: shareholder disclosure and governance matters. Buried on page 3. Nobody had questioned it. The assistant, a sharp woman named Julie who'd been helping me for 3 years, had given me a curious look when I'd made the request but asked no questions. She was good like that. Julie was one of the people on Madison's termination list too. 20 years with a company, salary too high for someone doing administrative work, replacement already identified from a temp agency at half the cost. I'd seen the spreadsheet 2 weeks ago when someone in HR accidentally copied me on an email chain. That's when I'd known I couldn't wait any longer. My phone buzzed. Text from Robert Hammond, board member and former CFO of a Fortune 500 company. "Sarah, I just got your filing. We need to talk." Robert was the one board member I'd cultivated carefully over the past year. Not through manipulation, but through competence. He'd asked me to pull together analysis on 3 different occasions: market comps, financial modeling, competitive research. Each time, I delivered work that was thorough and insightful. Each time, he'd looked at me a little longer, as if wondering why someone with my abilities was buried in accounting. I'd been waiting for him to wonder that. 3 hours, I typed back. "Let's talk in front of everyone." His response came immediately: "This is going to get ugly. It's been ugly for 15 years. Time to make it visible." The boardroom was on the 19th floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture that had been remodeled twice since I'd left. I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying nothing but my phone and a folder of documents. The receptionist looked confused. I wasn't on the security list anymore, but I explained I was expected for the board meeting. "I don't see your name." "Check with Robert Hammond." She made a call. Frowned. Made another call. Finally nodded and gave me a visitor badge. The elevator ride-up gave me time to center myself. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed someone who looked calm, professional, unremarkable. Perfect. I'd spent 4 years cultivating that appearance, the invisible competence that made people comfortable ignoring you. Today, I'd make them see me whether they wanted to or not. The boardroom was empty when I walked in. I took a seat in the middle of the table, not at the head, not at the foot. The symbolism mattered. I wasn't trying to dominate. I was claiming my place among equals. Opened my folder. Waited. The room smelled like expensive coffee and furniture polish. Through the windows, I could see the Portland skyline, the bridges crossing the Willamette, the mountains in the distance. This view used to be mine. I'd picked this office location myself back when we'd moved from our cramped original space. Victoria had taken credit for that decision too. Robert arrived first, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He'd been on the board for 7 years, one of the few people who'd been genuinely good at his job. He sat down across from me without greeting, studying my face like I was a complex financial instrument he couldn't quite value. "I've been on a lot of boards," he said quietly. "Seen a lot of things. This is a first. Is it going to be a problem?" "That depends entirely on what you're planning to do." "I'm planning to take back what's mine." He nodded slowly. "Victoria's going to fight this. She'll claim you concealed material information, that you violated disclosure requirements, that you've been engaged in some kind of fraud. Her lawyers are probably already drafting emergency motions. Let them draft. My lawyers have been preparing for this for 2 years. Every share purchase was legal. Every structure was legitimate. We may have pushed boundaries, but we didn't cross them." "Pushed boundaries," Robert repeated. "That's diplomatic." "I learned from the best. Victoria taught me that rules are guidelines for people without lawyers. Two more board members filed in, Jennifer Park and Thomas Walsh, both venture capital representatives who'd been around since the early funding days. They knew me, or thought they did. The confusion on their faces was almost worth the price of admission. "Sarah?" Jennifer's voice pitched up. "What are you doing here?" "Attending the board meeting." "As a shareholder?" "I don't understand." Thomas was already on his phone, presumably texting his firm's lawyers. Smart. He was going to need them. The door opened again. Victoria walked in, confident as always, ready for her victory lap. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than I made in a month as an accountant. Her hair was perfect. Her expression was serene. She looked like someone who'd won everything and knew it. She saw me and stopped mid-stride. For the first time in 14 years, I watched Victoria Chen's composure crack. Her face went white, then red. She looked at Robert, then at me, then at her phone like it might explain what was happening. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. How was I here? What did I know? What was about to happen? Her hand tightened on her leather portfolio till her knuckles showed white. Madison entered behind her mother, still glued to her laptop. She looked up, saw me, and her expression went from confused to angry in half a second. "Why is she here? I fired her this morning." "Sit down, Madison." Victoria's voice was tight, controlled, but I heard the edge underneath. Fear, maybe. Or fury. Hard to tell which. "No, seriously, why is she..." "Sit down." Madison obeyed, but she kept staring at me like I was something she'd stepped in. I met her eyes and smiled. Not a warm smile. Just enough to let her know I was exactly where I wanted to be. The rest of the board filtered in over the next few minutes. 9 people total, including Victoria and Madison. CFO, General Counsel, 5 independent directors, and the 2 venture capital reps. Everyone found their seats. Everyone except Victoria stared at me like I'd materialized from thin air. Robert called the meeting to order at precisely 2 o'clock. Ran through the standard preliminaries. Nobody was paying attention. Victoria sat rigid, her hands flat on the table. Madison kept glancing between us, starting to understand that something was very wrong but not yet grasping the scale. "Before we get to the prepared agenda," Robert said, "we need to address the disclosure filing that was submitted to the SEC this morning. Sarah, would you like to explain?" I stood. Not because I needed to, but because some moments deserve the formality. For those who don't know me well, my name is Sarah Miller. I've worked in finance here for the past 4 years. Before that, I spent several years in consulting and private investment management. I paused. And before that, 18 years ago, I co-founded this company with Victoria Chen. The room erupted. Jennifer gasped. Thomas started asking questions over each other. Madison's mouth fell open. Only Victoria stayed silent, her eyes locked on mine. I never sold my founding shares. Over the past decade, through various legal investment vehicles, I've acquired additional equity. As of this morning's filing, I own 67.3% of Insight Analytics. Madison found her voice first. "That's impossible." "It's public record as of 9 a.m. Your lawyers can verify it." "But you can't own a company where you work in accounting." "Actually, I can. There's no law against it." "Unusual, yes. Illegal, no." Victoria finally spoke, her voice deadly calm. "What do you want?" "What's mine? What's always been mine?" I looked around the table. This company exists because I built the software that made it valuable. I wrote the first 100,000 lines of code. I designed the architecture that we're still using today, that generates $500 million in annual revenue. I did that. Ancient history, Victoria said. Maybe. But I also own 2/3 of the equity, which makes ancient history pretty relevant. I turned to the board. I'm invoking my rights as majority shareholder. Effective immediately, I'm calling for a vote to remove Victoria Chen from the board and terminate Madison Chen's employment as CEO. The room exploded again. Madison started shouting. Jennifer tried to restore order. Thomas demanded to know if this was legal. Robert, to his credit, just sat back and watched. "You can't do this." Madison's face was crimson. "You're just some random employee who owns your company." "Yes. I can do this, and unless someone can show me a legal reason why I can't, I'm doing it right now." Victoria stood slowly. For a moment, I thought she might try to leave. Instead, She walked around the table until she stood directly across from me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. "You want to know why I let you think you were retired?" Her voice was soft enough that only I could hear clearly. "Because you were holding us back. Your precious perfect code, your obsession with what users wanted instead of what the market demanded. We became successful when you left. You became successful because you were selling my product. Everything you've launched since has been mediocre at best. You're bitter. This is just revenge for something that happened over a decade ago." "No." I met her eyes, kept my voice level. "This is taking back what you stole. There's a difference." Something flickered across her face then. Not quite guilt, but maybe recognition. For half a second, I saw the woman I'd known 18 years ago, the one who'd stayed up with me until 3 in the morning debugging code and planning our future. The one I trusted completely. Then it was gone, replaced by the polished mask she wore for boardrooms and investors. "If you do this," she said quietly, "if you actually go through with removing me, you'll destroy everything we built. The market will panic. Investors will flee. Clients will question the stability. You'll win your petty revenge and lose the company in the process." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "Or maybe the market will see that the company is finally back in the hands of someone who actually built it. Someone who cares about the product instead of just the quarterly earnings call. You have no idea what it takes to run a company this size." "I know exactly what it takes. I've been watching you do it for 15 years. I've seen what works and what doesn't. I've read every board report, every financial disclosure, every strategy memo. You're not the only one who can learn, Victoria." Her jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, something real. Instead, she turned to Robert. "This is a coup. Pure and simple. She's been planning this for years, hiding her ownership, working here under false pretenses." "My name is Sarah Miller," I interrupted. "That's my legal name. Has been since I changed it 12 years ago. I disclosed everything I was legally required to disclose when I was hired. HR has all the documentation. Nothing I did was under false pretenses." "You deliberately concealed your identity." "I used my legal name and answered honestly on my employment application. The question asked if I'd ever worked for Insight Analytics. I answered yes and listed my dates of employment. Everything was truthful. Not my fault nobody bothered to connect the dots." Jennifer spoke up from across the table, her voice uncertain. "Wait. You changed your name? For what?" I took a breath. This was the part I'd been dreading. "Sarah Chen. I was married to Victoria's cousin for 6 years. We divorced 14 years ago, 2 years after I left the company. I took my mother's maiden name, Miller, as part of starting over." The room went completely silent. Victoria's face had gone pale again. "You never told me about the divorce. You stopped returning my calls. Stopped answering emails. I figured you didn't want to know about my personal life anymore." "James never said anything. I asked him not to. I wanted to rebuild my life without reminders of everything I'd lost." It was the first time I'd acknowledged out loud what those years had cost me. Losing the company had been devastating. Losing Victoria's friendship had been worse. And my marriage, already shaky, hadn't survived watching my whole identity get erased. James had tried to be supportive, but he couldn't understand why I cared so much about something that was just business. The divorce had been quiet, civil, and absolutely necessary. I'd walked away from that life completely, moved to Seattle for 3 years, reinvented myself. It had been painful and lonely and exactly what I'd needed. Coming back had taken every ounce of courage I had. Robert cleared his throat. "We need to address this formally. Victoria, Madison, I'm going to ask you both to step out while the board discusses the situation." "This is ridiculous," Madison said. "I just became CEO this morning." "Yes," I said quietly. "That was your mother's last mistake." Update 1, posted 3 weeks later. I wasn't planning to update this, but the messages I've received have been overwhelming. People asking what happened next, whether the board vote went through, if I'm actually running Insight Analytics now. The short answer is yes, though it's been more complicated than I expected. The board meeting lasted 6 hours. Victoria and Madison left after the first 30 minutes, once it became clear that my ownership stake was legitimate and Robert was taking this seriously. The remaining directors spent the next 5.5 hours with lawyers on conference calls, reviewing every document, making absolutely certain we weren't about to trigger lawsuits or SEC violations. Turns out, Being technically legal and being obviously right aren't always the same thing. My lawyers had been smart about the structure, but aggressive. We pushed boundaries. Several board members were worried about shareholder derivative suits, questions about my disclosure timing, potential claims of insider trading, even though I'd been careful to avoid that. In the end, 3 things saved me. First, Robert Hammond pulled me aside during a break. "I've watched this company for 7 years," he said. "Read the old board minutes when I joined, did my research. You're telling the truth about being co-founder. Victoria's rewritten a lot of history, but the documents don't lie." Second, the general counsel, a woman named Patricia who'd been with Insight for 9 years, brought receipts. Email archives showing Victoria explicitly instructing the marketing team to remove my name from founder materials. Memos about how to manage the narrative around the company's origin. Communications with journalists where Victoria took sole credit for aspects of the business I'd built. Patricia had apparently been keeping this file for years, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. "I'm an attorney," Patricia said quietly. "I serve the company, not any individual executive. This has been bothering me for a long time." Patricia told me later, over coffee in the nearly empty building at 10 p.m., that she'd almost left 3 years ago. She'd been in a meeting where Victoria had given a presentation about the founding vision and erased every contribution I'd made. Patricia had been around long enough to know it was revisionist history, but she'd kept quiet because she needed the job. "I told myself it wasn't my place to contradict the CEO," Patricia admitted. "That maybe my information was incomplete. But I started keeping files. Documentation. Just in case someone ever needed the truth." "Why?" I asked. "Why take that risk?" She looked at me over her coffee cup, exhausted and serious. "Because I have a daughter. She's 14. Smart as heck, wants to be an engineer." I kept thinking about what I'd tell her if she came to me in 20 years and said her partner had stolen credit for her work. Would I tell her to just accept it? To let it go because fighting back was too hard? That's a good reason. It's the only reason that mattered. Third, and most surprisingly, Madison made a critical error. She tried to lawyer up independently and block the vote through an emergency injunction. Claimed I'd defrauded my way into ownership, that I'd been engaged in a conspiracy to take over the company. Her attorney filed paperwork so aggressive and poorly researched that it actually undermined their position. Made her look desperate and Victoria look complicit. The filing accused me of identity theft, securities fraud, and corporate espionage. It demanded a temporary restraining order against me entering company property. It characterized my 4 years of employment as infiltration with criminal intent. The language was so hyperbolic that even the judge who reviewed it raised eyebrows. Madison's lawyer had apparently never heard the phrase "less is more." The board voted 7-2 to remove Victoria immediately and strip Madison of the CEO title. The 2 dissenting votes came from the venture capital reps, who worried about the optics more than the facts. I became interim CEO that night at 8:30 p.m., 18 years and 7 months after I'd co-founded the company. Victoria left the building without speaking to me. Madison sent a profanity-filled email that Patricia immediately forwarded to the board, which got her escorted out by the same security guards who'd removed me that morning. I almost felt bad about that part. Almost. The last 3 weeks had been surreal. Half the company knew me as Sarah from accounting. The other half had been around long enough to remember the old stories about a mysterious co-founder who'd disappeared. Walking into the CEO office, my office again, felt like stepping into a parallel universe. The first morning, I arrived at 6 a.m., before most people got in. The office still had Victoria's things, photos of Madison at various graduations, awards from industry organizations, a sculpture that some client had given her. I boxed everything carefully, had Patricia arrange for Victoria's assistant to pick it up. Then I stood in the empty office and tried to remember what it felt like to belong here. The desk was the same one Victoria had chosen when we'd moved to this building. Massive, imposing, the kind of furniture meant to intimidate during salary negotiations. I'd always preferred working at whiteboards or in small conference rooms, somewhere I could spread out papers and actually think. But this was the CEO's office, so this was where I needed to be. I moved the desk to face the window instead of the door. Small change, but it helped. My first executive meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Department heads, direct reports, the people who'd been taking orders from Victoria for years. I'd worked alongside some of them during my time in accounting, we'd collaborated on projects, shared breakroom small talk, complained about the coffee. Now I was their boss. They filtered in looking uncertain. Careful. watching me like I might explode or announce mass layoffs or reveal that this had all been some elaborate practical joke. I let them settle, then stood at the head of the table. I know this is strange, I began. 3 weeks ago, I was someone you said hello to in the hallway and forgot 5 minutes later. Now I'm your CEO. The circumstances were dramatic, the transition was messy, and I'm sure you all have questions. David Park, VP of Sales, raised his hand tentatively. Are we all getting fired? No. I'm not here to clean house or settle scores. I'm here to fix what's broken and build on what works. Anyone who's good at their job and wants to stay has a place here. What about Madison's list? This from Rachel Torres, head of HR. The termination plan she was implementing? Shredded. Nobody is getting fired because they're expensive or experienced or over 40. If we need to make changes to headcount, we'll do it thoughtfully and fairly, not because someone in consulting made a spreadsheet. Visible relief around the table. These were people who'd been living under threat, waiting to see whose job would be eliminated next. I could give them stability, at least. Next question. Yes, I really did co-found this company. Yes, Victoria really did erase me from the history. Yes, I really do own 67% of the stock. Patricia has documentation if anyone wants verification. I called an all-hands meeting the day after the board vote. 1,100 employees on video conference, most of them having no idea what was happening or why the nice lady from finance was suddenly running everything. I kept it simple. Told them the truth about who I was, what I'd built, why I'd come back. Admitted that the situation was messy but promised stability and transparency going forward. Most importantly, I told them nobody else was getting fired. Madison's list of legacy employees to cut went straight into the shredder. The press has been brutal. Tech journalism loves a drama, and Erase founder secretly buys company back then fires CEO who fired her as catnip for headlines. Some outlets are treating me like a folk hero. Others are questioning my methods, suggesting I'm unstable or vindictive. Victoria has been giving carefully worded interviews about unexpected transitions and wishing the company well. She hasn't mentioned my name once. Even now, she can't bring herself to say it. The hardest part hasn't been the board drama or the media circus. It's been walking through the office and seeing what 15 years of Victoria's leadership actually built. Half of it is impressive. She did scale the company, did land major clients, did navigate a successful IPO. I have to give credit where it's due. But the other half is heartbreaking. The original product, my product, has been neglected. The codebase is bloated with features nobody wanted. The engineering team is burned out from years of contradictory directives. Customer satisfaction scores have been declining for 3 years straight, masked by aggressive sales tactics and contract lock-ins. I spent 3 days just walking around the building, talking to people. Not a CEO making grand pronouncements, but as someone trying to understand what actually happened while I was gone. The engineering floor was the hardest. These were people doing the same work I used to do, fighting the same battles against product managers who'd never written code. I sat in on a team meeting where they were debating how to implement a feature that made no technical sense but had been mandated from above because it looked good in demos. Can I ask a question? I interrupted. Has anyone actually talked to a customer about whether they want this? Blank stares around the table. Finally, one developer, couldn't have been more than 25, spoke up. We don't usually get to talk to customers. Product management handles that. What if I told you product management hasn't talked to customers either? That they're building features based on what competitors have, not what users need? More silence. Then a senior engineer named Stephanie, who'd been with the company for 8 years, laughed bitterly. We know. We've been saying it for years. Nobody listens. I'm listening now. I've spent the past 2 weeks meeting with department heads, listening to what broke and why. Yesterday, I sat down with the VP of Engineering, a guy named Marcus who joined 6 years ago and has been trying to hold things together with limited resources and constant interference from above. His office was a disaster. Whiteboards covered in diagrams, sticky notes everywhere, 3 monitors showing different dashboards. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in months. Can I ask you something? Marcus said at the end of our meeting. Why come back? You'd already won. You had the shares. You could have just sold them or taken board seats or whatever. Why come back into the building? I thought about that for a long time before answering. Because it's mine, I finally said. Not the equity or the money or the title. The product. The original idea that customers could have business intelligence software that actually made their lives easier. That's mine, and watching someone else mismanage it was killing me. Marcus nodded slowly. So what now? Now we fix it. He pulled up a presentation on his main monitor. Can I show you something? I've been working on this for 6 months, but Victoria wouldn't give it the time of day. What he showed me was a complete overhaul of our core platform. Stripped down, rebuilt from the foundation, focused on the things customers actually told him they needed. It was beautiful. Elegant. Exactly what I would have designed if I'd still been here. This is incredible, I said. Why wouldn't Victoria approve it? Because it would require admitting that our current product is bloated and confusing. Because it would mean telling investors we need to step back before we can step forward. Because it's hard and risky and doesn't make the next quarter's numbers look good. How long would it take to implement? With proper resources and no interference? 18 months. You have both. Start next week. His expression was worth everything I'd been through. We have a long road ahead. The board wants a permanent CEO named within 90 days. I'm the obvious candidate, but there's talk of bringing in an outside executive with fresh perspective. Robert is pushing back on that, arguing that I've earned the right to run my own company. We'll see how the politics play out. Meanwhile, I'm doing the job. Making decisions. Cleaning up messes. Having uncomfortable conversations with people who profited from Victoria's version of history and are nervous about mine. One of those conversations was with Brian Kepler, VP of Marketing, who'd been with the company for 12 years. He'd written most of the press releases that erased me, crafted the narratives that made Victoria the sole genius behind Insight Analytics. He came to my office 3 days after I took over, pale and clearly expecting to be fired. I just want you to know, he said, I was following orders. Victoria wanted the story simplified for media consumption. She said having 2 founders complicated the narrative. Simplified, I repeated. That's one word for it. I'm not proud of it. But I've got a family, a mortgage. I did what my boss told me to do. I studied him for a long moment. He looked miserable. Guilty, even. But also defensive, ready to justify whatever he needed to justify to keep his job. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to work with Patricia and our PR team to issue a correction. Not a press release, not a big announcement. Just a quiet update to the company website and our materials. Accurate founder information. Proper attribution. Can you do that? Yes. Absolutely. Good. Because I'm not interested in punishing people who were doing their jobs. I'm interested in making sure the truth is on the record going forward. We clear? Crystal clear. He left looking relieved, and I felt tired. This was going to be the pattern, person after person coming to explain how they'd participated in erasing me because it was easier than pushing back. Some would be genuine. Others would be covering themselves. All of them would need to decide whether they could work for someone whose existence they'd helped deny. And I'm coding again. Late at night, in my office, pulling up the old repositories and remembering what I loved about building this thing in the first place. The feeling of solving problems elegantly. The satisfaction of making something that works. Last Tuesday, I stayed until 2 in the morning working on a patch for a bug that had been annoying me for months. Nothing critical, just a small inefficiency in how the system handled large data sets. The kind of thing that probably didn't matter to anyone but me. Marcus found me the next morning, asleep on my office couch with my laptop still open. You know you don't have to do this anymore, right? He said, offering me coffee from the break room. You can delegate. I know. But this is the part I love. This is why I built the company in the first place. He smiled. Then by all means, keep doing it. Just don't burn yourself out. Too late. I burned out years ago. This is me remembering why it was worth it. I've also started saying no to things. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, invitations to join panels about women in tech. Not because I don't care, but because I'm learning that visibility isn't the same thing as validation. I don't need to be on magazine covers or give talks about my incredible comeback story. I just need to run my company well. Madison sent me an email last week. Subject line, we should talk. I haven't opened it yet. Not sure I'm ready for whatever's inside. Victoria hasn't contacted me at all. I lie awake some nights wondering if I did the right thing. Whether I could have handled it differently, been more gracious, found a solution that didn't humiliate anyone. Whether my ego is as much the problem as hers was. Then I remember standing in that corner office while Madison told me I was terminated without even looking up from her laptop. Remember 18 years of watching someone take credit for my work. Remember every article about Victoria Chen, self-made tech CEO, that never mentioned my name. I don't feel guilty anymore. A lot of people have asked if this is really a happy ending. Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I have my company back, but I also have a mess to clean up and a reputation to rebuild. I'm sleeping 4 hours a night and living on coffee and momentum. Some days feel like victory. Other days feel like I won a prize I'm not equipped to claim. But I'm here. In my office. Running my company. Finally visible after 15 years of being erased. That has to count for something. Update 2, posted 4 months later. Final update, and then I'm closing this chapter. The board made their decision last week. I'm the permanent CEO of Insight Analytics. Unanimous vote, no more interim title. They restructured my compensation package, formalized governance protocols, and brought in 2 new independent directors to make sure we're bulletproof on accountability measures. Robert Hammond became board chairman. Patricia got promoted to chief legal officer. It's been 4 months of controlled chaos. We've shipped 2 major product updates, both focused on stripping out bloat and returning to core functionality that actually helps users. Customer satisfaction scores are up 22%. Employee retention is stabilizing. Revenue is holding steady, which is all I can ask for given the upheaval. I hired Marcus as CTO. He's been worth every penny, rebuilding the engineering culture one team at a time. We're also recruiting aggressively, looking for people who care about building good software rather than climbing ladders. The media coverage has mostly died down. We're no longer the lead story in tech news, which is exactly what I wanted. There was a profile in a business journal last month that actually got the facts right, which felt like progress. Victoria has resurfaced as a startup advisor and angel investor. She's giving talks about navigating transitions and authentic leadership. I saw a clip of one presentation where she mentioned learning from unexpected challenges without elaborating. Someone in the audience asked if she had any regrets about how things ended at Insight Analytics. Every ending creates space for new beginnings, she said. I'm grateful for the journey. Still can't say my name. Still rewriting history right up until the end. Madison is working at a venture capital firm in San Francisco. According to LinkedIn, she's an associate focused on identifying emerging opportunities in enterprise software. I finally opened her email from 4 months ago. It was 3 lines, I'm sorry for how things went. I was following my mother's guidance and didn't ask enough questions. I hope you can forgive me someday. I wrote back 2 words, good luck. I'm not interested in punishing her further. She was 28 and trying to impress her mother. She made terrible decisions, but she's young enough to learn from them. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. The hardest conversation I've had was with my old team from the founding days. 5 engineers who'd worked with me in those first electric years, who'd left when Victoria pushed me out, who'd scattered to other companies and built their own careers. I tracked them down and invited them to Portland for dinner. We met at the same coffee shop where Victoria and I had sketched out our original business plan. They were wary at first, they'd all seen the headlines, didn't know what I wanted. I think they expected me to gloat or rage or process my feelings at their expense. Instead, I apologized. I should have fought harder, I told them. When Victoria started changing things, when the culture shifted, when we stopped being what we set out to build, I gave up. I took a buyout and left you all behind. That was wrong. They were quiet for a long time. Finally, one of them, a woman named Amy who'd been my first hire, spoke up. We were all angry at you, she said. For years. Felt like you abandoned us. I did abandon you. But we also understood why you left. Victoria made it impossible. We left too, eventually. Everyone from that era left. Amy told me what happened after I was gone. How Victoria had brought in new management who didn't understand the product. How they pushed features that looked impressive in demos but made the software harder to use. How the original vision got buried under layers of corporate strategy. I stayed for 3 years after you left, Amy said. Kept trying to protect what we'd built. But every sprint planning meeting was a fight. Every product decision felt wrong. One day I just couldn't do it anymore. Kevin, who'd been our lead architect, nodded. I lasted 4 years. Watched them turn the codebase into something I didn't recognize. The final straw was when they wanted to rewrite the query engine, your query engine, because some consultant said it wasn't modern enough. Never mind that it was fast and stable and customers loved it. Did they rewrite it? I asked, almost afraid to know. They tried. Spent 18 months and millions of dollars. New version was slower, buggier, and crashed under load. They ended up rolling back to your original code. I closed my eyes. Victoria never mentioned that. Of course not. That would mean admitting they'd made a mistake. Easier to bury it in the quarterly reports and move on. Another engineer, Priya, leaned forward. The question is, what happens now? You've got your company back. Are you going to make it what it should have been? Or is this just about ego and revenge? Fair question. One I've been asking myself for months. I'm going to try, I said. I'm going to try to build what we should have built the first time. Make it about the product again. Take care of the people who do the work. Be honest about what we can and can't do. That's a nice speech, Kevin said. But talk is easy. It is. Which is why I'd like to show you rather than tell you. Come back. Join me. Help me rebuild this thing the right way. Amy laughed. Are you offering us jobs? I'm offering you the chance to finish what we started. The conversation went until midnight. They asked hard questions about my plans, my vision, whether I'd actually learned anything from what happened. I answered honestly, admitting where I didn't have solutions yet. By the end, something had shifted. Not quite trust, but possibility. Two of them signed on. Amy took a VP of engineering role, focused on rebuilding technical culture. Kevin came back as a senior architect, reporting to Marcus. The others declined but promised to stay in touch. 3 out of 5 felt like a win. Why did you say yes? I asked Amy as we walked to our cars. She smiled. Because I've spent 10 years working at places that were fine. Competent. Professional. But I never felt like I was building something that mattered. Maybe we won't succeed. Maybe this whole thing will crash and burn. But at least we'll be trying to build something real. No pressure, I said. All the pressure. That's what makes it worth doing. The office is different now. Still the same building, same glass walls, same expensive furniture. But the energy has shifted. People seem lighter somehow, less afraid of making mistakes. We're working hard, probably too hard, but it feels purposeful rather than performative. I walk through the building now and see changes everywhere. Small things, mostly. The engineering team has collaboration sessions where people actually talk to each other instead of silently following specs. The product managers are spending time with customers again, asking what they need instead of assuming they know. Marketing is telling honest stories about what our software does well instead of making impossible promises. Last week, I sat in on a design review where someone junior pointed out a flaw in the senior engineer's proposal. The room went quiet. Under Victoria, that kind of pushback would have been career-limiting. I watched everyone wait to see how I'd react. That's a good catch, I said. Let's workshop alternatives. The relief was palpable. We spent an hour solving the problem together, and the final solution was better than anything any of us would have designed alone. That's what I'm trying to build. A place where the work matters more than the hierarchy. Where people can tell the truth without fear. Where we actually care about making something good instead of just making something that looks good in presentations. It's harder than it sounds. 15 years of cultural rot doesn't disappear in a few months. Some people are thriving under the new approach. Others are struggling, unsure how to function without clear directives from above. A few have left, deciding this isn't the company they signed up for. I'm okay with that. Better to lose people who want a different culture than to compromise on what we're trying to build. I'm coding again regularly. Not a CEO busy work, but because I can't help myself. Late nights, headphones on, diving into the old systems and finding elegant solutions to problems nobody else saw. Marcus caught me at it last week and just shook his head. You know you don't have to do this anymore, right? He said. You can delegate. I know. But this is the part I love. This is why I built the company in the first place. He smiled. Then by all means, keep doing it. Just don't burn yourself out. I've also started saying no to things. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, invitations to join panels about women in tech. Not because I don't care, but because I'm learning that visibility isn't the same thing as validation. I don't need to be on magazine covers or give TED Talks. I just need to run my company well. There's a certain freedom in that realization. Last week, I got a letter. Physical envelope, handwritten address, no return information. Inside was a single page, unsigned. I've had time to think about what happened, it read. About what I did and why I did it. I convinced myself that pushing you out was necessary for the company's growth. That your vision was too small. That I was the one who knew how to scale. I believed my own narrative so completely that I forgot it was a lie. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I remember. I remember who built what. I remember what you gave up. I remember the day you trusted me to be your partner, and I remember every day after when I betrayed that trust. Whatever happens next for either of us, the truth is finally on the record. That has to count for something. Victoria's handwriting. No question. I read it 3 times, then put it in my desk drawer. I haven't decided if I'll respond. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks silence is the only appropriate answer to 15 years of silence. The letter sits there like a weight. Some days I take it out and read it again, looking for sincerity or manipulation or something that would tell me what Victoria actually wants. An apology without asking for anything in return feels almost more complicated than if she'd asked for her job back. I showed it to Amy during one of our planning sessions. She read it twice, handed it back. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to respond, tell her I accept the apology or that it's too late or something. Part of me wants to pretend I never got it. What would responding accomplish? I honestly don't know. Closure, maybe? Or just opening a door I spent 15 years trying to close. Amy studied me for a moment. You know what I think? I think you're asking the wrong question. It's not about whether Victoria deserves a response. It's about whether you need to give one. What's the difference? Deserving is about her. Needing is about you. If responding would help you move forward, do it. If it would just reopen old wounds for no reason, don't. But don't make the decision based on what she's earned. Smart advice. I'm still not sure which choice is right. Maybe someday I'll know which impulse is right. For now, I'm exactly where I need to be. Running my company. Building my product. Working with people I respect. Making decisions based on what's right rather than what's easy. I'm 48 years old. I've spent 2 decades fighting for something I created, watching it be stolen, taking it back piece by piece. The revenge was satisfying, I won't lie. Watching Madison's face when she realized what was happening. Seeing Victoria's composure crack. Taking my seat at the head of the table in front of everyone who'd written me out of the story. But the real satisfaction comes from quieter moments. Shipping a feature that makes customers' lives easier. Seeing an engineer's face light up when they solve a hard problem. Reading survey results that show people actually like working here again. Building something that matters in a way that's sustainable. There's a young developer on Marcus's team, can't be more than 23, who reminds me of myself at that age. Brilliant, impatient with politics, obsessed with writing elegant code. She came to my office 2 weeks ago with a proposal to refactor a critical system that's been problematic for years. This is going to take 6 months, she said. And it won't add any visible features. It'll just make everything work better under the hood. I know that's a tough sell to executives. Show me what you're proposing, I said. She walked me through her plan. It was sophisticated, thoughtful, exactly the kind of foundational work that gets ignored in favor of flashy new features. The kind of work I used to love doing. This is good, I told her. Really good. You have my approval. Take the time you need to do it right. She looked stunned. Just like that? You don't want to see a cost-benefit analysis or a presentation or, I trust you to do good work. That's why we hired you. Go build something excellent. She practically floated out of my office. Amy, who'd been listening from the doorway, smiled. You're getting soft, Amy said. No. I'm finally in a position to support people the way I wish I'd been supported. That's not soft. That's what leadership should have been all along. I didn't get a fairy tale ending. Victoria didn't have some dramatic breakdown or public apology. Madison didn't learn a profound lesson and become a better person overnight. The company didn't instantly become perfect the moment I took over. Real life doesn't work that way. What I got instead was reality, complicated, messy, sometimes frustrating, occasionally beautiful. I got my company back and all the responsibility that comes with it. I got the chance to build something right, knowing full well I'll make new mistakes along the way. I got to exist again, not as a footnote or a deleted paragraph, but as the person who actually built this thing. That's enough. To everyone who read this story and reached out, thank you. Your messages mattered more than you know. Many of you shared your own stories of being overlooked, erased, underestimated. Being told you didn't matter when you knew you did. Having your work stolen or your contributions minimized. The messages came from everywhere. A 62-year-old engineer who'd watched his startup partner take sole credit after he'd been forced out due to health issues. A 35-year-old designer whose creative work had been presented as her boss's vision. A teacher who'd developed an entire curriculum only to have it copyrighted under the department head's name. Parents who'd built businesses while raising children, only to watch partners claim they'd done it alone. One message in particular stayed with me. A woman named Diana wrote about working in her family's restaurant for 20 years, managing everything while her brother took the title and the credit. When their father retired, he left the business to the brother, assuming that's what everyone wanted. Diana had never complained, never demanded recognition, so her father never realized how much she'd contributed. "I didn't fight back," she wrote. "I just accepted it and moved on." Reading your story made me realize I'm still angry about it 15 years later. Not just at my brother or my father, but at myself for not speaking up. For thinking that good work would eventually be recognized without me having to demand it. "Thank you for fighting. It helps to know someone did." I wrote back to her. Told her it wasn't too late to have that conversation with her brother, with her father. That speaking up now would be harder than speaking up then, but it might still be worth it. That she deserved to have her story told accurately, even if it didn't change the business ownership. She responded a week later. She'd talked to her father. It had been painful and complicated, but he'd listened. He had no idea she felt that way. Assumed she was happy doing what she was doing. The business situation didn't change, her brother still owned it, but her father started telling people the truth about who'd really run things for 2 decades. "It's not justice," Diana wrote. "But it's acknowledgement. That matters more than I expected." These stories remind me why this was worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been made invisible by someone else's narrative. If you take anything from this, let it be this: document everything. Keep your receipts. Know your worth, even when the world tells you otherwise. And if you build something valuable, never let anyone convince you to give it away just because they're louder or more confident or better at selling stories. You built it. It's yours. Hold on to it. I'm done updating this post. Time to get back to work. A final thought. There's a particular kind of strength that comes from being underestimated. When people look through you instead of at you, dismiss you as forgettable or past your prime, they make a fatal error: they stop paying attention. They forget you're watching, learning, preparing. The world rewards flashiness and confidence, celebrates the people who dominate every room they enter. But sometimes the quietest person at the table is the one holding all the power, patient enough to wait for exactly the right moment to remind everyone who built the foundation they're standing on. True vindication isn't loud or obvious. It's showing up every day to do the work with integrity, trusting that quality eventually speaks louder than marketing, that truth has a way of surfacing even when people spend years trying to bury it. And in the end, the most profound victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's becoming the person you needed when you were struggling, building something worthwhile, and refusing to let bitterness poison what you fought so hard to reclaim.